October 1st, 1949. The past is prologue. Mao dreams of remaking China in the communist image. But war breaks out in Korea. He dispatches Chinese volunteers to fight the Americans as they approach dangerously close to the Chinese border. That act touches off an era of Sino-American bitterness which will last for 20 years. The United States comes to the rescue of Jiang Kai-shek on Formosa and bars Peking from the United Nations. The Korean War over, Mao turns to the economy, which prospers after he gives land to the peasants. The economy booms. Encouraged, he launches a bold experiment, the Great Leap Forward. Overnight, he tries to plunge China into communism and industrialization. Brutally, he seizes the land he had only yesterday given to the nation's half-billion peasants and forces them into vast rural communes. The gods are not kind to this proletarian demigod. Nature, red in tooth and claw, unleashes typhoons, floods, plagues of locusts and drought on the land. Bad management, inexperience, and inaccurate statistics do the rest. An apoplectically furious Nikita Khrushchev, who had warned Mao against this adventurous gamble, cancels Soviet aid, withdraws Soviet plants and technicians. Communism in China totters on the edge of failure. Taking advantage of the crisis, a hard-headed group of administrators led by Mao's chief lieutenant, Liu Shaoqi, grabs power. Mao is ousted as president of China, and Liu takes over. The road back is slow and painful. The Chinese tighten their belts against gnawing hunger. Heavy industry is abandoned in favor of a crash program to develop agriculture. The communes are revamped and broken down into more easily manageable units. Fearing the now hostile Russians, the Chinese comrades concentrate on building their own nuclear weapon. In mid-October 1964, the world is startled by a cataclysmic event over a remote desert in Xinjiang province.
Biao.
China has joined the United States, Russia, France, and Britain in the exclusive nuclear club. In an ironic twist of fate, the blast coincides with a political explosion inside Russia. For the next day, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev falls from power. Mao now senses his opportunity to strike against the pro-Russian faction of the party. So now, Mao launches a vast new purge called the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. It is neither proletarian nor cultural, and certainly not a revolution. Its aim is to overthrow the Liu people and reinstate Mao's idea of Marxism. Madame Mao, now sharp-tongued and fighting mad, leads her husband's comeback struggle. Although Liu Shaoqi and his friends think that they hold all the cards, they have forgotten the nation's hot-eyed youth. She organizes the Red Guards to purge the white-haired chief of state and Mao's other enemies. Placards around their necks, dunce caps on their heads, they submit to the cruel torture of these fanatic children. Zhou Enlai himself comes under fire. But the Red Guards get out of hand, and Mao has to call in the army to put them down. What he has feared now happens. The army, rather than taking orders from the party, now gains the balance of political power. Mao, appearing before a Congress of the party, apparently is the victor in his long and costly struggle against Liu. Lin Biao, the sickly, soft-spoken defense minister, emerges as his designated successor. Madame Mao, once a nobody, now becomes a member of the powerful ruling party Politburo. But it is the army which calls the tune. It chooses Zhou Enlai, China's man for all seasons, to restore the country to sanity. The result, his ping-pong diplomacy, and Richard Nixon's trip to Peking.
April 14th, 1971. In Peking's Great Hall of the People, Premier Zhou Enlai meets with the Americans who have broken through the Chinese wall for the first time in 22 years. These Americans are a cross-section of today's America. A conservatively dressed corporation executive, a bearded professor, some typically pretty girls, an authentic hippie with long hair, a soft-spoken black, a Maoist student in granny glasses, and a computer technician. Zhou is the leader of China's moderates. It is he who is responsible for carrying out the new ping-pong diplomacy. He is the consummate showman. Witty, charming, and handsome, he has a magnetic personality which sweeps many foreigners off their feet. Mao could not have chosen a better man to show China's smiling face to the world. I remember Zhou from 25 years ago in Chongqing, Shanghai, Nanking, and Yunnan. His hair is grayed a little. His right arm is bent a bit as a result of an illness 6 years ago. But at 73, he seems as bouncy, as personable, and as untiring as ever. He is urbane, courteous, and patient. But under the velvet, there is iron that has been forged in 100 revolutionary furnaces. His brilliance as a negotiator and diplomat is acknowledged by friend and foe. He knows how to sniff the winds of change and shift with them. He faces the American team and makes a historic statement.
They have been cut off for a long time, but now, with your accepttion of the invitation that we extended to you to come to China this time, we have opened a new page in the relations of the Chinese and American people.
He speaks of a coming exchange of American and Chinese newsmen and looks at me.
Mr. Roderick, you open the door.
A door opening. It is an image which, since the days of John Hay 71 years ago, persists in the language of China and the United States. Peking, 1971. It is the capital of the new China. Yunnan is a cherished memory. From this great city of the storied Chinese past, Chinese communism rules a united country. The proletarians occupy the red wall palaces of the emperors. They know the value of symbolism. There is no emperor, but there is Mao. His presence is more widespread than theirs ever was. Wherever I turn, I see the cherubic face of Mao, peering down from enormous billboards, looking up into the sky from airport terminals, woven into tapestries, spreading across whole mountainsides. Millions of his portraits, hundreds of millions of his little red books have been distributed around China. No one can escape his slogans, bled out over omnipresent loudspeakers. Richard Nixon may well wonder when he sees all those pictures and slogans whether there is a limit on campaign spending in China. There isn't. But Mao doesn't need to advertise. Unlike Nixon, he does not have to go to the people every 4 years for a mandate. He is elected to his job by the men and women of the party Central Committee. Most of them he has handpicked himself. Mao needs this public exposure because of the Chinese masses. Millions of them still can't read or write. Millions don't know what Marxism or communism is all about. For 2,000 years, they have been accustomed to having a leader, the father of the family, the emperor on his throne. The communists have destroyed the family. The emperor is no more. Instead, there is Mao. It is no accident that he looks benign and fatherly. He is China's new father figure. For communism is a mixture of faith and magic, a religion whose Bible in China is the little red book of Mao's quotations. Instead of the icons and statues of Christianity, there is Mao in white plaster and cheerful paint. Instead of medals, there are buttons to be worn on the jacket. Like a Roman religious procession, pictures are carried at the head of marching bands of youths, Red Guards, or peasants. This new religion demands total faith, total obedience, and in return, it promises that miracles will be accomplished, and the masses believe it. Tiananmen, the gate of heavenly peace. It is the main portal of the fabulous, forbidden city, long the home of Chinese emperors. The high red walls now house the government which Zhou Enlai heads. In one of its corners, Mao Zedong lives in simple comfort. The square in front of Tiananmen is the hub of the People's Republic. It is a mecca for the Chinese faithful. It is to China what Moscow's Red Square is to Russia. On every May Day, on each October 1st, the national anniversary, 500,000 of them obediently line up in numbered places to cheer Mao atop the huge gate. Then for hours, they parade through the square, a riot of Chinese color, a massive exhibition of Chinese pride. Tiananmen holds a special place for Mao. From August to December 1966, he appeared there before 11 million forcefully cheering Chinese to kick off the Cultural Revolution. Today, in contrast to those teeming days, the square is quiet and almost empty. It is dominated by the Great Hall of the People, a cavernous monument to Chinese communism where Richard Nixon will encounter Zhou Enlai. Peking is laid out in straight lines, a massive grid which city planners have long admired. In 1971, the grid has been imprinted on men's minds. Their lives are straight and purposeful. They march everywhere in precise lines, chanting the unwavering precepts of communism and Maoism. There is no room to waver. There are no detours. The bicycles ride up and down in a steady, uniform stream. There are no youthful adventurers going against the grain. When I lived in Peking in 1947, it bustled with cheerful anarchy. The clip-clop of rickshaw boys, the whistles, bells, clappers, horns and drums announcing crickets for sale, shears to be sharpened, noodles to be eaten, and 100 fascinating things to be examined are now seldom heard. A trip into China's past is the Summer Palace, once the favorite of the Empress Cixi, otherwise known as the Old Buddha. To improve this place of airy grace, she spent money earmarked to modernize the Navy. To satisfy her critics, she built an immovable marble boat in the palace lake. China's present rulers would not be guilty of such fantasy. The boats they build are real, movable, and mounted with guns. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese, many of them soldiers in uniform, come to the summer palace to while away the hot months. Many of them plunge into the cool waters of the artificial lake. For a time, imitating Mao Zedong's famous swim in the Yangtze River, it was a training place for thousands who wanted to learn how to swim. Some 40 of the communist faithful are said to have drowned there one summer in an excess of watery zeal. The Summer Palace is an illustration of the communist attitude toward culture. Mao urges the Chinese to cast aside old things, old ways of thinking, and old habits. But he has a deep respect for the past, which springs from his experience as a historian and a classical poet. The great art of China still survives in the museums, in the temples and the palaces, but it is not the art of modern China. Mao is contemptuous of art for art's sake. He insists that China's literature, music, opera, painting, and motion pictures reach the workers and peasants rather than the intellectuals alone. The result is cultural sterility. It is reflected in the Peking opera, which Mao once loved, and in the ballet. There, the hand of his wife, Jiang, is evident. On the stage and in the dance, something she calls revolutionary romanticism holds sway. Banal, superheroic, and moralistic, it glorifies the Chinese Revolution. The heroes are bigger than life. The villains more villainous than Fu Manchu. But the aim is the same, to persuade the peasants and workers that theirs is the best of all possible worlds. That pre-communist China was wicked, cruel, selfish, and poor. There is enough truth to the theme to make it acceptable to the masses. But revolutionary romanticism builds no planes, launches no ocean-going ships, explodes no atom bombs. It takes education and skill for that. Because China is in a hurry, the educational system has been sharply revised. 4- and 5-year courses have been slashed to 2. The new students are chosen not by examination, but by their co-workers in the factories and the fields. Party committees pass on their loyalty. A third of the time is spent in the classroom. The rest goes into constructing factories, building automobiles, making computers, running tractors. Philosophers are expendable. But China has a long way to go. The nation's schools were closed for 3 years during the Cultural Purge. At their reopening, students walk down nearly empty halls. There are other kinds of schools less attractive than Qing was, strangely like those of Big Brother in George Orwell's 1984. They cleanse the thinking of the men and women purged in the Cultural Revolution. I am told that Liu Shaoqi, once China's president, is in such a school. He is a non-person. In Shanghai, among the graying vestiges of the past, I find the same Spartan spirit, the same revolutionary enthusiasm, the same Puritan morality. Life along the famed Bund, lined with the hotels, banks, commercial houses and custom houses of this once foreign city, moves along with the same unhurried pace. The streets, like those of Yan'an, are spotlessly clean, and there are no flies, no dogs, no litter, no rubbish, no overpowering stenches. All this is astonishing to anyone who remembers the noisy, crowded, cluttered Shanghai of yesterday. Once the dead and the dying rated hardly a nod from passers-by. Now there are no signs of them. Whatever one says about this society, it is evident that it concerns itself with the fate of its poor. It is a one-class society, just as it was in Yan'an. 2 colors predominate, civilian blue and military green. The unisex look has been the fashion for decades. Both men and women dress alike in jackets and trousers. There are no chic boutiques to display styles they can never wear. Chinese women wear no lipstick, no rouge, no mascara, no fingernail polish. They display no earrings, bracelets, or necklaces. Yet, though they lack the props which most women regard as vital to life itself, the women of China are as lovely as ever. Life in the fields has brought a bloom to their cheeks and a lightness to their bodies they never knew before. Though they lack the fripperies of the past, their lot in life has improved. They can vote. They can marry for love, rather than go through arranged marriages with men they have never met. They get time off after childbirth, and they may practice birth control if they wish. Children's nurseries permit them to work beside their men in the factories where they get equal pay. Industrial China needs them. There is work to be done. China is a work society, and in the 4th 5-year plan, China is straining every muscle to catch up with the West and Japan. A rapprochement between the United States and China could have an enormous impact on Chinese industry. Since the days of the open door policy, Americans have looked at China as a huge and potentially profitable market. American traders will find themselves dealing with a totally different kind of Chinese businessman. They're no longer are private enterprises. All are either run or controlled by the state. Foreign businessmen attending the Canton Trade Fair, which is China's industrial window, say they have found the Chinese shrewd, meticulous, and honest. It is more than ever true that a Chinese businessman's word is his bond. The success or failure of industry rides on the bent backs of China's peasants. The economy primarily is an agricultural one, but it is not mechanized. There are a few tractors, but most of the peasants still use primitive farm tools. Though China has had 9 consecutive good harvests, the population continues to grow at an alarming rate. Feeding nearly 800 million people is a staggering task.